Hello, Great Faith Groups, and welcome to this week where we're looking at strength fathered by God. Now, it's a funny phrase, strength fathered by God, but it is our strength understood with God as our Father. Up until recently, I have been able to beat my oldest son in an arm wrestle. And I hate to admit this, and I hope he's not in a group where he's going to see this, although I'm sure he already is very aware of it. But a couple of months back, he has been going to the gym faithfully for over a year. He's been getting big. He's been on working out, dieting, all that stuff. And I'm just getting older. And I'm just getting fatter and I'm getting weaker. That's what it feels like. And he said, "Dad, let's arm wrestle." And it was a standoff. We could not budge each other. I didn't win. He didn't win. But it was the first time it was ever even close. Up to that point, I had always beaten him, and that's what he knew, and he knows he wants to beat me. And so I'm in trouble, and I'm faking injuries, and I'm avoiding the next time he asks because the reality is I know he's going to win. He's got strength now. And the thing I find fascinating, though, is as a young man, he loves his strength, and he is impressed with his strength, and he wants to grow in his strength, but he doesn't always know the purpose of strength. And we're talking, obviously, again, as we talked about in the first month of Great Faith Groups, that godly strength is defined as the strength to do what's right. And that is the purpose of the strength God gives each of us. And we must recognize and know the purpose of this strength. What has God given you? Where are you strong? It's that strength to do what's right. And I want to look at this month at what it means to recognize, hey, I'm a child of God. How does that impact my strength? Well, I think the first thing is we need to recognize then the strength, the purpose of our strength to do what's right is to do what's right for our Father. And if we take strength outside its purpose, we lose the power of it. In other words, if we take our wealth, if we take our stuff, if we take our physical strength and we use it outside of God's purposes, the strength won't last. For example, in the story of the prodigal son, again in Luke 15, it says in verse 13, the young son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far-off country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. You see, he had gone up to his father and he said, "Father, give me my half of the inheritance." In other words, "Father, take it out of the family business," probably a farm at the time. And he said, "Hey, I want it for myself, for my thing. I want to go and live with it my way." And he went off and he squandered it because that wealth taken outside of its purpose, outside of the context of what his father, how his father had earned it and what had been earned for, couldn't last. And what about us? Do we take the things that God has provided? Do we take the things that give us strength, our wealth, our relationships, our jobs, any of those things? Any way that you would define, this is my strength. And I use strength here to also mean our wealth. And are we trying to use it outside of God's purposes and wondering why we're running out? Wondering why it feels like we are squandering it? We need to know and understand the purpose of it. We need to spend it on the things God wants. Now, I know sometimes we can think, well, God's given it to me. God has entrusted it to us, but for his purposes. And so we want to ask, how are we spending what God has given us? How are we spending what God has provided? How are we using the strength God has? Are we just walking around going, I've got strength and I don't know why? Or are we even worse, taking our strength and running off to do our own thing with it? Or are we saying, God, show me where you want me to spend my strength? In the Old Testament, there's a character named Samson. I think he's a prime example of a man of great strength, but who used it for selfish purposes. And in this story, Samson is promised great strength if he will live a certain way according to the ways of God. And he goes up and down in that. And he forgets why. He's supposed to be a judge and save Israel. And he goes through all his life kind of wrestling with this and doing really stupid things that others can't stop him from doing because he has such incredible strength, until a woman fools him, finds out the source of his strength is his long hair, cuts his hair, and steals his strength from him. Turns him over to his enemies, and he's standing there chained between pillars in this huge hall where they're having a great feast of his enemies mocking him. And for the first time in his life, at his weakest moment, he suddenly realizes his purpose. His purpose was never just to have strength. His purpose was never to have power or wealth. His purpose was to save God's people. And in that moment of his greatest weakness, God actually returns his strength, and he pulls the pillars down and kills everybody in the hall. Seems a bit graphic, but what I'm trying to get to is we will lose our strength if we misuse it. God will take it away. So do an assessment this week. Say, what strength do I have, and am I using it for my Father's purposes? Or am I taking it out? And the reason we have to look at and see what strength do we have is because the older son in the Luke 15 prodigal son story, he didn't recognize the strength that was available to him. He didn't recognize it. He was out in the fields working with the servants, and he didn't realize all that his father had belonged to him. And so are there areas of your life where you're going, God has not provided for me. I don't have enough. I don't have the strength that I need. I don't have the wealth that I need. I can't pay my bills, whatever it might be. You need to begin to turn to your Father in heaven and say, would you provide the strength I need to do this? Would you provide the courage I need to speak biblical truth to a friend? Would you provide the wealth I need to take care of my children and provide for them? Would you begin to provide these things? But as he does, make sure you are using it for his purposes. Because strength of great faith, fathered by God, is strength put towards the purposes our Father has.